Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good day, and welcome to this info session on the need to strengthen the capacities of African cities, mainly the technical capacity and the human capacity. My name is Emmanuel Makaka. I work at the Regional Office for Africa in UN Habitat, and I'm based in Nairobi. And this session has been organized by the African School of Economics, African Urban Lab in Zanzibar, and UN Habitat. So just to give a background on the session, Africa is urbanizing rapidly currently, and it's one of the fastest growing continent in the world. It is projected by 2050 that 60% of the African population will be living in urban areas. And with that, it comes with a lot of challenges and as well as the opportunities. Currently, Africa is facing a number of challenges. The urban management is kind of poor. Urban governance is lacking. And then we have a lot of gaps in urban management and okay, sorry. Africa is urbanizing rapidly, and we have a lot of gaps in urban management, and the data part it's lacking. So there's a need to capacitate African cities. And currently, we have a number of programs and activities, as well as tools and approaches that are not fit for purpose for Africa, because we are copy-pasting on what has happened in other cities and try to replicating in Africa, while it's not fit for purpose. So the need for this webinar is actually to evaluate the emerging urban trends in Africa and try to find a solution on how to move forward and how to make African cities sustainably. And then the other objective of the webinar is to identify key priority areas and action and offer solutions for urban actors. So with this, we have two panelists. The first one is Curtis Lockhart, is around. Then the other one is Charles Wagura, will be joining in a few minutes. And then before we move to the panelists, we'll have an opening session by Professor Leonard. Professor Leonard is the founder and president of the African School of Economics, and is also a professor of politics and international affairs and economics at Princeton University. Professor, over to you to do further introduction about yourself and open the session. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much. I think this is really a wonderful opportunity, not only to introduce ourselves and African School of Economics and Africa Urban Lab, but also, to present the work that we have been doing for the past 10 years. So yeah, I'm Leonard Wanchekon. I'm the Jim Madison Professor of Political Economy at Princeton University. I taught at New York University and Yale, and got my PhD in economics from Northwestern. So I'm quite well traveled. I was born in Benin, in a small village. I still remember vividly that the most pivotal time in my life when I moved from my village to Cotonou, to the capital city, and everything changed since then. I became truly cosmopolitan, and I made a lot of friends. I became far more connected to the world. So for me, city is really something really critical, not only for personal development, for economic development in general. So I moved from Benin, lived in US and Canada before being where I am. So, so let me tell you briefly, say a few words about the African School of Economics. The African School of Economics was initiated in 2011, but it opened effectively in 2014 in Benin. The vision is quite straightforward. So we just wanted to make sure that we put Africa to the top in terms of human capital, in terms of research. So, for instance, only 5% of the published research in top 10 journals on Africa, only 5% are by Africans, you know, in economics in particular. I'm pretty sure that it is similar in other fields. So we are not even, Africa is not even present in basically thinking about the future of the continent. You know, African scholars are not as involved as should be. So we wanted to change that. The second is development. You know, we wanted to be able to contribute directly to development through promoting entrepreneurship and promoting science and technology, not only through our program, but also the project we want to run with the private sector and international organizations, like, for instance, the Africa Urban Lab and other projects, other similar projects. The third one is basically governance. So we want to work with governments and make sure that they make the right decisions, that they are enlightened about, you know, what need to be done and how it could be done. So again, you know, ASC is very, very focused, not on just on what, but the how, you know. So we are very constructive, extremely positive and constructive in our approach to governance. So what is African School of Economics? So far, it's we have a number of programs for the past 10 years, Benin and Côte d'Ivoire, and then soon Nigeria and Zanzibar. In Benin, Nigeria, we had master's and bachelor degree in economics, finance, and computer science. And the results there have been spectacular. You know, like we place 57 students in PhD around the world, particularly in the US. Our former students now work at the World Bank, IMF. Some are faculty at New York University and Dartmouth College. The place looked like a primary school when you look at the infrastructure, but in terms of the results, in terms of what we have accomplished, it's just incredible. So, and now we want to build on this. We want to build on this. So that's why we have decided to expand thematically, but also regionally. So regionally, we set up a regional campus in Nigeria, and the grand opening happened 2 weeks ago. And we will, in Nigeria, we will not only have campuses in the country, but also we'll have the campus in Nigeria will superintend campuses across West Africa. And now Zanzibar is going to be the regional hub in East Africa with, you know, at the foundation, the African Urban Lab, but also the African School of Economics Research Hub. And hopefully, if all goes well, according to plan, in September 2025, we are going to open, you know, the whole university, not only the research center that I just talked about, but also the various programs. And then we also are planning to have a research hub in South Africa and Morocco. So degree programs in Zanzibar in Nigeria, plus research infrastructure, but then a high-level research infrastructure in North Africa and Southern Africa as well. So this is how we plan to cover the whole continent. Now, beside the regional expansion, we have thematic expansion in science and engineering, business, and public policy. So African School of Economics will covering not only economics and finance, but also engineering, science, and public policy in a very deep level. So by pushing, by having such a wide coverage across Africa, by also pushing research at the frontier, we can expect that in 5 years, we'll be out there at being one of the top places. So places, not just in Africa, but in the world, you know. So that's where we are. That's where we are aiming at. Now, let's finish by talking about the Zanzibar project. So as I started by saying, I think cities are super important and remain very important, you know, for several reasons. And, you know, obviously, you know, cities are the place where you can push for human capital development very fast. You can attract investments, you know, and create like tech hub, agricultural hub, and so on, like it happened throughout history. But also cities are places where you develop very constructive, liberal, cosmopolitan values. You know, Timbuktu, for instance, the crossroads in Sahel in 12th, 13th century was perhaps one of the most liberal places, you know, in history, because it was a crossroads. You know, I mean, in Africa and elsewhere, ideas to work together, to live together, incentive to do so always exist. You know, I also did a study where I showed that places, for instance, that are democratic today in Africa are places where 60, 70 years ago, when Africa was becoming independent, they fought for independence in cities peacefully, as opposed to in rural areas violently. You know, it shows that there is something unique about cities, not only in terms of ideas, in terms of attitude, in terms of development prospect, that makes, you know. Now, you can be very proactive and extremely deliberate about building cities. You know, that's what the charter city do. And that's what we are trying to teach and to develop here. And I think a very, very important element that I need to also stress is the fact that development sometimes happen in pieces. You know, like for instance, you need cluster of things that work well for a long time, you know, and then it adds up to be development at national level. So cities are critical. So even if the country is not doing very well, but then there are part of the country that doing extremely well, that we control, that we manage, then it's going to spill over to other places, you know. And that part, we are in control of it. We can pick up a place and say, this belongs to us. We are going to make it work. We are going to develop it, you know. A very good historical example is Ethiopian Airlines. Ethiopian Airlines have been around for, I don't know how many years. It's now one of the top airlines in Africa, despite the fact that for a long, long time, you know, Ethiopia was in a huge trouble politically, you know. A lot of atrocities, a lot of things happened, but then Ethiopian Airlines have, as a cluster of development in Ethiopia, has existed, has prospered, and maintained over time, you know. So it's a model, for instance, that can be generalized into how you can actually build small cities, large cities, manage it properly, and make it the anchor for development prospect, not only nationally, but regionally. So that's my overall introduction of myself and African Council of Economics Zanzibar, AUL, and also an introduction to where we are going and what we are trying to do. And as you can see, it's quite exciting, and I hope each one of you would like to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Leonard. Before you leave, maybe as a follow-up, can you just give us a taste of the interconnection between the economics and urban development in Africa?
So I mean, I think, okay, two things. So first, as I said earlier, let's take economically, you know, the mind, the money, the attitude that contribute to national development are by and large built in cities. You know, you see what I mean? So, you know, I mean, there is one town in Benin called Porto Novo. It was the capital city. It's a capital city during the colonial time. It's still the capital city. 50% of the top 10 mathematicians in Africa come from that town. And when you live there, you understand why. Because Porto Novo is a massive classroom. You have a lot of interconnection between neighborhoods, between people, and so on and so forth. And when something happened to one in a context like this, it happened to everyone. So there is a high school in the place that was doing very well, has a culture, has a very strong teaching in mathematics, and this spread everywhere and created the ecosystem that led to this result. What I'm saying is that city can be a place where development happens fast, and anyway, so that's one. And then the second part, and I think this is really, really important. Typically, like cities are politically inclusive and like forward-looking and liberal. I mean, in any place in the world, cities vote more inclusive, more liberal than rural areas. In fact, cities drag rural areas towards the future, as opposed to the other way around. So politically, economically, urban development, because of those reasons that I gave, are huge and important, for development. And again, as I said, we cannot just let it happen naturally over decades and centuries. We need to be proactive. We need to say, if cities are crucial to development and cities should look like this, why don't we design it and make the process work faster, as opposed to leaving it to chance and to history for this to happen. So that's why, the study of, urban development, not only that, but also, the idea of charter cities are super, super, super important for development project, And what is interesting is that, like you can actually, cities will tend to be a little bit more autonomous in the way they are run because they are big, because they have a lot of resources. That's where most of the taxes come from. So they can be more easily autonomous from the country as a whole. So as a result, they have the potential to make sure that when things work in the city, it works well everywhere else because they are the place. Because they are the place with money, the place with people, the place with the future-oriented type of attitude, and so on. So I'm not looking down on rural areas at all, but I think that the leadership role in economic development, in political development, historically has lied in the hands of cities and people who live there. And they made the most of it. It's not like, you see what I mean? So revolution, big economic hubs, they tend to happen in cities first. So that's in a nutshell, I think, why I think that urban development is really, really, really critical for not only economic development, but also, as you can see, I insist on cultural and also political aspect, Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor, on really explaining the catalytic effect of urban cities, urban areas, and cities vis-a-vis the country's development, and how cities are shaping up the geopolitical space in our nations. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So thank you for that, Professor.
So, and then let me say something very quick. Cities are not new concept in Africa. You see what I mean? Like, city has always existed, And what I'm telling you about cities today are cities from 12th century, cities from 17th century, 18th century, 19th century in Africa, So we are just trying to revive and manage this, not only tradition, but also this, this concept that always exists, internationally. Yeah, thank you.
And maybe before I let you leave, have you the interconnectedness of cities and urban planning and the economy?
Yeah.
Because for now in Africa, we have the spatial transformation. It's going negatively than anticipated. We have a lot of slum and all the informal settlement coming up due to urbanization. So, but the economy is stagnated under that.
Yeah, and I think there are two things. So first one is because we are not deliberate enough in setting up universities, research centers in cities. Like for instance, somebody told me yesterday that in fact, much of innovation, drive for innovation happen in cities in Africa today, particularly in slums, you see what I mean? Because you're gonna have an idea, you'll reach out to people, get them to see it, and then get feedback and move on. You see what I mean? So it's because institutions like ASC are not necessarily part of the way we develop, we develop cities, and I think this is very important. And then another element is to sort of push for major, investments in cities through special economic zone and through big, investment. Like for instance, let's say I want to make this corner the tech hub of West Africa or the world. And then I develop a long-term plan, I bring investors, and I make sure that within 5-10 years, using the energy, the knowledge that developed from cities, make sure that this works fast. You can do that in a city, I think it's the lack of will, lack of planning, and also not having understood that ideas and human capital is super crucial for urban development. That's massive. Like for instance, when somebody wants to set up a city, they are going to get 2,000 acres outside of somewhere and then say, all right, yeah, we are going to set up an university here, blah, 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 nice building and stuff. Instead of thinking about setting up an university in one of the slums, in 2 buildings, and then have labs, you see what I mean? And take full advantage of the resources, the energy happening there to push things fast, So, what is fascinating is that all those ideas that I'm talking about, those are ideas that we are going to develop, elaborate, in the program that AUL and African Social Economy Zanzibar and African Social Economy will be developing. We are going to take those ideas, decision makers, and make sure that they listen.
Yes, Professor. And then thank you, Professor, for that, for the opening remarks and all the discussions. It's actually insightful, and it has paved the flow for our first panelist, that is Curtis Lockhart. He is the Executive Director of the Charter City Institute and the Director and Founder of the Africa Urban Lab in Zanzibar. So, Curtis, over to you. Thank you. You're muted. You're muted.
There we go. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, now let me just share my screen. And then I'm going to ask if everyone can share the screen as well, or see the screen, I should say. Okay, does everyone see the screen?
Yes, yes.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you so much, Emmanuel, and thanks, Professor Wanchukon, for that insightful and opening conversation. I'm going to add a little more details and nuance to the activities, the initiatives, the programs that the first research center at ASE Zanzibar is going to undertake. So the African Urban Lab is the first research center at this new university, ASE Zanzibar, that we're excited about and that we're going to chat a little more about today. Before I dive into the specifics on the lab, I want to give a few more background information on ASE. I know Leonard chatted and gave some great history on his founding of ASE now a decade ago in his home country of Benin. And then after that, I'll dive into the lab, the motivation behind the lab, the first programs that'll be offered, and then we'll open it up to Q&A to the audience. So with that, let me go and dive in. So as Leonard mentioned, the African School of Economics, it aims to create the next generation of world-class Pan-African scholars. It started in West Africa, as Leonard mentioned, in his home country of Benin back in 2014. It was really successful. It then expanded thereafter to Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, here. And then after that, last year, expanded to 2 more campuses in Nigeria, one in Abuja and one in Lagos. So ASE has a really firm footing in West Africa and now wants to expand to other regions of the continent. Leonard has this very ambitious vision for ASE as a Pan-African university system. And so part of its Pan-Africanism is expanding to other regions. And so East Africa is going to be the first region outside of West Africa that we expand to, and ASE Zanzibar will be the regional hub for East Africa. This is Leonard and I. This is late last year, signing a partnership between my organization, the Charter Cities Institute, and ASE to bring ASE to Zanzibar. We're really excited about this. As this slide allocates or alludes to, the first research center under ASE Zanzibar will be the Africa Urban Lab. This is starting this November, so in a few months in 2024. As Leonard again alluded to in his opening talk, we next year want to begin to expand to offer other programs under ASE Zanzibar. So first we'll look at expanding to a School of Arts and Sciences. This is slotted to take place in late 2025. The following year, we want to open a School of Business, and the year after that, a School of Engineering. So we do have ambitious plans to expand both programming and scope of ASE Zanzibar, but we'll be starting with the research and the programs under the Africa Urban Lab that I'll talk a little more about now. I couldn't help going forward without showing everyone on the webinar a pretty picture of the location, the site location of ASE Zanzibar. It is not a bad place to spend some time, take a break, and you really dive into and use your brains for frontier research activities and other things undertaken at the university. So this is Fumba Town. This is where ASE Zanzibar will be located, and we're really excited about this expansion. Okay, so just some few slides on the underlying motivation and the reason, the rationale for starting with a cities-focused program, starting with the Africa Urban Lab. Leonard mentioned some of the rationale, but I thought I'd dive into some specific capacity challenges faced by many African towns and cities across the continent. So in particular, there are 3 key capacity constraints that a lot of cities face, and that's legal, that's fiscal, and that's technical. So I'll just go briefly into each of these. When it comes to legal capacity, it's a crazy fact that only 3 countries across the continent actually have the legal power to, number 1, set tax bases and tax rates, number 2, collect revenue, and number 3, access international capital markets. So cities and towns across the continent, despite growing really, really rapidly and therefore needing legal empowerment to flexibly adapt to that growth, they are constrained legally, and that makes it difficult to act and adapt. Secondly, fiscal capacity. So it's a sad reality that only about a handful of African cities are able to issue municipal bonds. And this is stark because municipal bonds are actually the main way that other regions historically have funded the growth of their cities during these regions' rapid urbanization period. So the fact that this bond market is really constrained actually puts a lot of fiscal capacity constraints on fast-growing towns and cities. In addition, African towns and cities are actually urbanizing at much lower levels of income than other regions have historically during their periods of rapid urbanization. So just to illustrate with an example, the US hit 50% urbanized around 1920 at $7,500 per capita. Fast forward to the late 1970s, South Korea hits around 50% urbanized, so the same level of urbanization at $4,500 per person, so slightly lower than the US. Fast forward to today, and much of the continent is careening towards 50% urbanization at per capita incomes of $1,000 per person. And so I think this example speaks to the fiscal constraints that many, many fast-growing towns and cities across the continent are facing today. And this is one of the key things that the Africa Urban Lab wants to dive into and come up with innovative solutions for. And then thirdly, around technical capacity. So this is my favorite factoid when talking about some technical capacity constraints. In the UK, when it comes to professional urban planners, the UK has about 37 urban planners per 100,000 people. That same statistic, it's 12 urban planners per 100,000 people in the United States. For Africa, the number is under 1. So it's 0.89 urban planners per 100,000 people. And this is for the most rapidly urbanizing place on the planet right now. And so again, this is one of the key capacity constraints that the Urban Lab wants to speak to. So that's just a review of some of these capacity areas. I know Charles, Emmanuel's colleague at UN Habitat, will speak a little bit more about this after I'm done, and we're happy to answer more questions on these during the Q&A as well. And I should say, before moving on to the specifics on the Africa Urban Lab, so all of these capacity challenges, as Leonard alluded to, are compounded by some issues around how we train and educate the urban leaders and urban professionals of tomorrow. A lot of the curriculum, a lot of the training, a lot of the education is not tailored to fill these specific constraints that today's fast-growing cities and towns across the continent face. And this is another area where the Africa Urban Lab comes in. So let me transition to speaking a bit on the specifics of the lab. I'll start at the high level. Just the vision for the AUL is to train the African city builders, planners, urban leaders of tomorrow to help harness rapid urbanization for human prosperity. It's the most rapidly, as I said, urbanizing region on the planet, adding 1 billion people to its cities in the next 26 years to 2050. This is an unprecedented speed and scale of urbanization taking place across the continent, and the AUL wants to be a hub for solutions to this challenge. And so specifically, what are the 3 pillars that sort of motivate the AUL's programs and activities? First one is its real-world focus. So one of the things that myself and the team did before coming up with the programming for the AUL and its activities was we just canvassed a lot of the master's programs for urban planning programs, a lot of the other urbanist-related degree programs across the East African region, and we talked to folks, and we said, what would you say are some of the gaps that the current curriculum as it's currently taught today has? And I think the overwhelming response was that a lot of current master's programs or bachelor's programs around urbanism or urban planning, they tend to overemphasize theory, and they don't have enough practice and applied orientation, such that when these students graduate into the labor market, they oftentimes don't have some of the key day-to-day technical skills required to do the job of an urban planner of a rapidly growing city. So for example, we've heard instances where folks graduate from these programs and there's a lack of knowledge of how to do kind of basic municipal budgeting using Microsoft Excel, or there's a lack of, for example, knowing how to use GIS mapping software to map out digitally the expansion path of a city. So these again are basic kind of technical skills that when you overemphasize and over-index a program on theory and under-index and under-emphasize practice and application, this is the outcome you get. And I think this is the status quo right now. And so this was a gap we saw, and this is a gap that the Urban Lab is going to seek to fill. We like to call this sort of a teaching hospital philosophy. So if you guys think about, for example, the medical profession, medical students, they take 4 years in a medical doctorate degree. Their brains are jam-packed full of the latest medical knowledge, but they haven't actually applied this medical knowledge in the real world in practice. And to do that, to effectively apply all of this medical knowledge, they're paired with a really experienced doctor in a teaching hospital setting. And that doctor supervises the medical student in an applied setting in the real world. And the student learns through that supervision to do things like surgeries and effective diagnoses and the day-to-day job of a doctor in the real world. That's an analogy for what the Urban Lab seeks to do, is move from, yes, frontier research, which will be conducted at the lab, but move and connect frontier research to application. The second pillar is around flexible and accessible courses. So again, in canvassing folks across the region, one of the gaps that we uncovered was that a lot of professionals in urbanism and urban planning, they want to upskill, but they don't want to have to quit their job to take a diploma or a certificate or a master's program. They want to be able to upskill while still maintaining their current employment. And so that in order to provide access to those types of people, you need to design and structure the curriculum flexibly, or at least some options within the program flexibly, so that you can allow access to these folks. So we'll do that, and I'll talk a little bit about that structure in a few slides. And then thirdly, the third pillar is around providing a community of practice. So obviously it's important for folks as they move into the labor market and move throughout their careers to keep abreast on the latest and greatest on best practices. And this often helps and is facilitated by building a network of like-minded professionals in the urbanism space. And so that's one of the things the lab seeks to do, is really tighten these feedback loops so that folks across the network can learn from one another and engage in knowledge exchange. Okay, so those are the three pillars. Just to give some information on some of the specific programs on offer at the Urban Lab. So the first program on offer starting this November is a professional diploma in urban development. This slide really speaks to the modular, the flexible nature of the program. So we want to, the program consists of 4 modules, and I'll go into the breakdown of the 4 modules in the next slide. 4 modules plus a capstone project, and that'll get one a full professional diploma. Participants don't necessarily have to take the full diploma. If they would like to take specific modules within the diploma, they can, and they'll get a certificate for each of the modules they complete. And again, back to being flexible and modular, you don't have to complete it all in one foul swoop. We do allow you some time if you're a busy professional to complete the full diploma program. Who should attend? We are focusing this professional diploma on early and mid-career professionals, so that's about 2 to 5 years experience. Again, this is a preference. This is not a requirement. So I repeat, if you are a professional or a student that don't fall within this 2 to 5 years of experience, please don't take this as our hard and fast rule. If you're interested in this, I would encourage you to still apply, as this is just a preference, not a strict requirement. In terms of the sequencing, the timing of the diploma program, so it'll be taught in 2 intensive blocks. So the first block, as I mentioned, would be in November. It'll be a 2-week intensive. The first 2 modules will be delivered during this November block, 1 module on urban governance and the second module on urban planning. And at the end or throughout this first 2-week block in November, students will be paired with a capstone project. So this is back to the real world focus capstone project. The student will be embedded with this project, and it'll be a real world project within a real world organization that focuses on cities. After this block in November, that'll be an in-person block in Zanzibar, in Fumba town. After this 2 weeks, students then go back to their respective homes and they can complete the capstone project remotely over the next 5 months. And then they'll return back to Zanzibar in person for the second block in April 2025 for the second 2-week intensive. And that block will deliver the third and fourth module around urban finance and urban economics. And at the end of that 2-week block in April, students will also present their capstone project. And that's the full diploma program. So we're really excited. We think this offers flexibility. This offers access to a wide range of professionals. And so we're very excited about that. Beyond the, well, I should say before moving on, these modules here were not kind of chosen randomly. They were chosen for a reason. If we go back to some of the capacity gaps mentioned, legal, fiscal, technical, we think the urban governance module speaks to the legal issues, the urban finance and economics module to the fiscals, and the urban planning module to some of the technical constraints. Beyond the diploma program, we want to next year expand to a full master's program in urban development. This program will be a 1-year program, and this will start in 2025 for both practitioners and research-oriented students. And so there'll be core courses here. In addition to methods courses, the research track will take more methods than the practitioner track, and that'll be the main difference. And then the main difference, obviously, between the master's and the diploma program is there are a lot more elective options in the master's just because it's a longer time duration. There are a few other differences, and we can share the slides after the presentation today. And just a few words on some of the partners we've been able to bring into the Africa Urban Lab. So obviously today we're hosting this webinar with UN Habitat, and they've been a great partner. My organization, the Charter Cities Institute, has been a great founding partner of the Africa Urban Lab. The International Growth Center from the UK, this is the Ministry of Education in Zanzibar. Leonard's, Professor Wanshikan's home at Princeton University has been a great supporter. Makerere University and University of Nairobi and several others like the University of Dar es Salaam, State University of Zanzibar, Ardi University, and others. So we have a great slew of partners, and this will speak to the community of practice that we want to build, the network of like-minded urbanization-focused research centers across the continent and sharing best practices. If you are a potential partner, we are interested in a bunch of different types of partnerships. So teaching or apprenticeship placements, if you're an urbanization-focused organization or firm. If you have officials within your organization, nominating them to take the diploma program. If you are a researcher, we are looking into research affiliations with the lab, so do reach out, in addition to student exchanges or other types of collaborations. So I put Heba as my colleague here on the call, on the webinar, I should say. Her email is here. Please do reach out. If any of this strikes a chord, we would love to hear from you. I can't end before mentioning that we actually do have scholarships available for students. Both partial and full scholarships are available. The scholarships will be awarded based on need and merit. And the good news is there's no additional application needed. You just apply to the diploma program and you'll automatically be considered for these scholarships. So I'd encourage everyone interested, if you are, take advantage of this opportunity. I want to also note that we do have some institutional scholarships that are allocated. So if you are interested in the work of the Africa Urban Lab after hearing what we're up to today, and you're interested in partnering, do reach out and we'll talk about partnerships, and then we can also chat about perhaps extending some institutional scholarships to your organization. And And last but not least, the deadline for the first diploma program at the lab is September 16th. So that is rapidly approaching. That's about just under 3 weeks away. So please apply if you're interested. I've put the website here, asczanzibar.com/admission. So do check that out. Other than that, thank you everyone so much. And Emmanuel, I shall turn it back to you, sir.
Thank you, Curtis. Before you move on to the next panelist, Mr. Charles Wagura, I'll like to ask you a quick question on the qualification or rather the criteria for the scholarships.
Yes. So as I said, the criteria will be a combination of merit and need. So obviously we want to be inclusive and improve access. So need and financial constraints will be considered. But we also, we want to attract the best and brightest to ASC Zanzibar and the Urban Lab. And so a history of academic achievement and professional achievement will be the second main criteria. So those are the two main things is sort of need and merit.
Thank you, Katas. Now we move on to the next panelist.
I should also say, sorry, Emmanuel, I just wanted to mention before we move on. So, I went through those slides. This is just the sort of start of the conversation. I should say that myself and some of my colleagues, we will be with UN Habitat, Emmanuel and his team in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa next week at the Africa Urban Lab. And we are presenting about the work of the Africa Urban Lab and ASE and the Charter Cities Institute. And so if you are in Addis or you're planning to go to the Africa Urban Forum, do come find us, come chat with us in person. We'd love to have and further the conversation. And then after the Africa Urban Lab in Ethiopia, there's the World Urban Forum in Cairo, Egypt in early November. So if you're planning to go to that, likewise, come chat with us in person, and we're happy to answer any conversations or any questions there. Sorry, Emmanuel, back to you.
Thank you, Katas, for reminding us that. Now we move on to the next panelist, Mr. Charles Wagura. Charles Wagura is an urban development expert at UN Habitat, and he's had over 20 years of experience in urban development projects and intervention. He's an housing expert and slum upgrading expert. So over to you, Charles. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Emmanuel. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, it's sincere apologies. I was not able to start with you on time. But with that, and I see also time has really moved. Thank you, Curtis. I followed you on the progress of presentation, and nice to hear about the training. And I think also Professor Leonard had already given the introductory bit. On the same line, I want also to give apology of Marcela, who was to be speaking to you, the Regional Office or Africa Director, UN Habitat. As Emmanuel has said, I work with the UN Habitat, the Regional Office for Africa, Kenya Country Office, and several years of experience, especially what I would call largely the human settlement areas. I think, Curtis, you have mainly dealt on the elements of the training. But I think probably the way I would look from our side would probably highlight a few elements, especially on where I would say where the tarmac, the rubber meets the tarmac, because we are at the interplay of the knowledge and also the doing. And I think one of the things that we could also be live to is, this is where I would say that once we have been taught or what we have been able to be given, and especially understanding the dynamics that are changing, what are we doing on the ground? And I think we at the UN Habitat, where our main focus is to support especially the member states in terms of the urban area and the urban development as sustainable and housing. I think this is where we have also developed quite a lot of tools. And I think one of the narrative we know enough, I think I would be sharing my screen. I think, let's see, I'll have a few slides. I don't know whether you are able to see. Are you able to see anything?
No.
Emmanuel?
No.
No. Let's Herbert do that for you, Charles. just a
Okay.
minute. Yeah.
Fine, fine. I think that would be good. Okay. I think we already know the narrative of urbanization in Africa. And I think we are saying that it's the rapidly urbanizing continent in the world. And we are looking at a scenario where over 40% today are in the urban areas, but it is projected to be almost towards 60% in 2050. And also the question of the youth bulge. We can see that largely these big populations will be the youth. So also we are expecting the youth also to be innovative in terms of shaping our urban for going forward. And out of that, we can actually start seeing what do we derive from the urbanization? Is it only the element of looking at the training or the challenges that are there, but what opportunities that could come through? And that one, we can harness it both in terms of application of the knowledge and skills that we have, and also putting everybody into play in terms of where they participate in. And I think on that, we already know the challenges. Next slide. We already know in Africa, the many challenges we are talking about. So I would look at them in terms of now, how do we enhance the capacities of the urbanization institutions or urban actors in terms of delivery of the needed services. We are already talking of things to do with where urbanization in Africa is happening faster than we are planning. We are talking of very high demand for infrastructure and matched with very little resources. And also now this one coupled with urban poverty. And I've already mentioned the youth bulge. You can see that dynamic already. I think in Africa, we already live to that. And then the other issues and problems of the degradation of urban environment. So besides all this, is it all doomed? And I think no. And I think Curtis has, in terms of the training and also building capacities, we look at the young people who are being trained, but also we look at the already existing players in this sector, both private and the public sector, and also other actors within the same, and the communities who should be at the center. So what are we doing at the UN Habitat to support this? We have already, from what you can call normative activities, we already have developed tools, and probably these are the tools that we also champion, that as we go on, we capacitate the different urban players and actors, both from the training and those who are acting. One, we have already the setting up tool. This is what we call city resilience action planning tool, and which this gives us the opportunity that you're able to understand the issues, especially when we are looking at resilience. And more so, you know that currently the climate change issues and the nexus with what is happening in our urbanization. For example, in Kenya here, recently we had a very devastating flooding. And the question is, what are we using the tools for planning to mitigate these challenges that are coming through in terms of the climate impacts? We are able to understand, and then we do proper data collection using the tool analysis, and then we develop the framework for resilience. And I think in Africa, we are already having more than 40 cities that are already experiencing the use of the setup tool. And this is readily available for use, and probably as we continue on is to review and to enhance the tools through also training and doing the capacity to the urban, especially the urban administrators and managers. We also have the next slide. We also have this, for example, the tools has already been used. I think they just few highlights. It's many cities in Africa, but specifically that we can highlight the recent work that was done in Dodo, in Mozambique. This also experiencing very high problems of cyclones. And you look at the elements of how do you have resilience construction work that are very good on housing, urban infrastructure, urban spaces. So these are the tools that we would like to highlight more and to be able to be implemented or to be adopted for implementation. We also have the next slide. Yes, these are the other areas that we are supporting in Africa. I think I don't need to mention this, but we can see there are several city areas that we are in. But some of the things I would probably highlight that we need to be very, very specific about is we find things like solid waste management in Africa running through across in terms of the problems. We also have the elements of drainage, and we also have the element of how do you deal with these issues of safety in urban areas. So these tools are able to equip us to be able to develop into that. And then we also have the elements of affordable housing, which I think affordable housing in urban areas, one of the biggest problems that we have been experiencing is affordable housing. And these affordable housing issues is how do we access houses in urban areas? There is already the question of high cost of production of the houses. There's the question of who is responsible for the houses of the masses. We already have those elements of coming up with good policies, but who is implementing them? So I think these are the discussions that we need to put across so that innovations start coming from early so that we are able to address all these challenges. We also have delving into the elements of participatory planning, where we look at the communities or the people in the urban fabric. They already have ideas, but we don't need to keep them in the periphery. So we need to develop them more deep into the planning processes. So these activities also we push a lot, especially from the UN Habitat, and knowing the SDGs and the new urban agenda, that we capitalize especially on the issues of leaving no one behind, so that all of us are already inbuilt within urban fabric continuously, so that nobody is left behind. And also we resist the issue of marginalization within our cities. So the next slide, we also need to check. We also probably need to check. I think these are just the examples of the areas that these tools are applicable. And I think I don't need to delve into this because I think I need to pick up some few elements where we need to check critically, where are we? Then the other element is when we check at the SDGs, the SDGs, we have the 5 Ps. And the question that comes in is the element of the people, peace, partnerships, planet, and prosperity. The question is, where are we as players and in terms of these capacities that we are building? We see that in terms of the planning, especially for urban areas, the issue of the planet in terms of protection, the issues of who are you bringing on board in terms of partnerships, the issues of what are we achieving at the end of the day, are we excluding or including more in the urban spectrum? So these are the things that we probably need to check and also to build as we are going forward in terms of the training and the capacities we are building for the managers, especially in the cities. The question also comes in, especially on the financing, especially on urbanization. Who is responsible for financing what? For example, as I have talked of the housing, who is responsible for housing, the element of housing the masses? We have also talked of the issue of creation of jobs in terms of the youth, especially those who are coming to the urban areas. How are we harnessing the tools that we already have to make sure that we increase the investments in these urban areas and competitiveness for doing business and trade? What is the innovative mechanisms are we bringing on board to capacitate the urban institutions for their own social revenue, especially to deal with the development of the infrastructure? I think these are the new elements that are coming on board that probably we need to strongly infuse in terms of the training, so that when we are bringing on board any other new training, in the training that we are doing today, both at the capacity of the young and also the already existing, we bring the new innovations, because the future is urban and we must strongly secure that. So we as the UN, what is our major role in terms of this? One, we already can do the technical assistance or the capacity in terms of development of coming up with the development plans. We also do the knowledge sharing. I think we sit at a good position of networking and sharing the information and knowledge that have been created over time, and also sharing the experiences. For example, like now the planning in different countries, we have that opportunity to be central, that there's planning that happened in Nigeria, happened that is going to happen in Nairobi, Tanzania, and all the others. So we have those knowledge that we can be able to easily share without necessarily now and then compare the best practices. So these are strong elements that we could bring on board to support, especially the Africa Urban Lab on that. And then the partnership, the network that we are having. And we are happy also this partnership that is coming on board, that we want to put it on board and then we use it to share the knowledge and the experiences of what is happening. And then the development of the tools and then the application of the tools. Because I think it would not be very good that we just develop tools and then we share them. I think it could be very, very good that we develop tools that are applicable, that are tailor-made and localized to our situations, so that we don't just develop tools there. So we just create the basis, but we localize with implementation on the ground. Maybe a few challenges that still we find is that even in Africa, we have seen many policies have been done, good frameworks, but still the other two, some challenges still happen is, why are these not being implemented? What is the problem? I think these are some of the areas that we need also to dig deep in terms of research. What are the governance challenges that are there? Because the technical perspective is strong and good, but why are these things not happening? And we keep on still having these challenges and problems of complaining why the urban areas, especially in Africa, we are not getting full advantage or potential for the urbanization process as it's going on. So these are the areas that we look for and we are able to support and to capacitate both at the training and also at the actors or the practitioner level in terms of that. And I think as we proceed on, as Cortez has also said, we are also reminding participants that we'll be having the Africa Urban Forum from the 3rd, 6th in Addis, and also the World Urban Forum that will be coming later in November. So I think these are also platforms that we could share more experiences and knowledge. But from this perspective, I think these partnerships and the Africa Urban Lab and a lab, I would look at it in a process of training, practical, in terms of doing, so that we are able to propel the knowledge and ideas to proper use. Thank you, Eman, and maybe any questions. I think I was quick so that because of time, and I know other participants have already spoken probably on these other areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I like the future is urban quote. It really resonates about Africa, the trajectory of Africa's urban population. I just have a few questions for you and Casses before we open the floor for everyone. So the participant, you can have your question in the Q&A. We'll address them, and then as we untangle the need for capacitating African cities, we'll answer them. So my first question, maybe for Curtis, tell us more about the Capstone project. Since you told us the program has different thematic areas, urban economics, urban governance, urban finance, and whatnot. So how will this Capstone project be fit for purpose? Will it be an integrated project, or it will have a specific focus? And then the other question is, why Zanzibar? And will you expand to other cities in East Africa? Yeah, over to you, Curtis.
Emmanuel, I feel like you're biased based off your seat in Nairobi right now. So just on the first question about the Capstone project, so the answer is we'll have a wide array, a diverse array of Capstone project options. So as you said, Emmanuel, we're going to have students that some of them will specialize in the urban planning aspect. Some of them will be more urban economics or urban finance focused. Some of them will be urban leaders that are more focused on the governance aspect. We want capstone options that speak to each of these different specializations and focuses. So for example, some of the capstone projects will be focused on planning for urban expansion. We've got a partner that does urban planning work for rapidly growing cities across the continent, where students can be embedded there. Likewise, I know UN Habitat has expressed they'd host some capstone students and have some apprenticeship embedded in some of their activities that could be focused on governance or urban finance or urban economics, some of the aspects that your colleague Charles just spoke about in his presentation. So the answer is we hope to match students appropriately to the right capstone project based on their preferences and their focuses. And then on why Zanzibar? So Leonard can chime in, Professor Wanchikun can chime in if he has additions to this, but several reasons. So one of them is it's a very well-connected place. So the airport is well connected not just to Nairobi and Kampala and Dar es Salaam and other key cities in East Africa, but it's well connected internationally as well. And so it's that facilitates transport and people being there. We've got great partners in the Zanzibari government. They've been really supportive of and really eager to host the African School of Economics Zanzibar. And so that's always essential is having a government that is keen to have you on board. And then we also have great local partners in Zanzibar as well. So we have the city developer of Fumba Town, where ASC Zanzibar will be located, is extremely keen to have the university located there and the Africa Urban Lab located there. And in fact, some of their employees at CPS are already applied and submitted applications to the diploma program and are excited to participate. And then, above and beyond that, I showed you the picture. Zanzibar is a tropical island paradise. People like spending some time there. And so that's not a bad additional reason to throw into the mix. Professor Wanchikun, would you add anything to that on why Zanzibar?
Yeah, I think that's great. So I will add maybe two things. Is we need diversity, like islands are part of African landscape. In fact, the islands in Africa are probably the best governed, the more stable, whether you take, like Cape Verde, you take Seychelles and Mauritius and so on. So for ASC, being present in this particular place, will not only get us maybe something that we may not necessarily get elsewhere. For instance, the focus on marine science, because marine science, if you want to live, you want to develop marine science, for instance, the Caribbeans around the world, but also islands in Africa are very important, So there is something unique given this particular landscape, which is, very important. But then, I think I insisted on this earlier. We just happen to be in that place, but we are regional presence, like it means that we will still be from there so highly connected with Zambia, with Kenya, with other part of Tanzania, with Ethiopia and elsewhere, So, I think it's important to see those initiatives as regional initiatives that happen to be based in one specific place. But also, I think I will not insist enough on what Curtis have said, that the support from the government, the fact that they want us there, and the fact that they help us build ties with IIT Madras, the engineering school from India, all this together makes it, basically, it makes it a great place. But again, we are Kenya, we are Zambia, we are Ethiopia. We just happen to be based in Zambia. Sorry, in Zanzibar. Yeah.
And I'll just add, Emmanuel, and we just had looked at some of the applications that have been submitted for admissions, and they do reflect this. There are not just applicants from Zanzibar and here in Tanzania, but there are Kenyan applicants, there are Malawian applicants, there are applicants from Ethiopia and Rwanda and all across the region. So in fact, there are applicants from Benin and Nigeria, and I think there's one from Gambia or Sierra Leone as well. So any and all are welcome to apply, but this will be the East African regional hub.
Thank you, Kata, and thank you, Professor. Maybe one last question for Charles before we open the Q&A. You talked about different approaches and different tools to urban development, or rather to solve some of the challenges facing cities. I haven't seen a tool that's more integrated. So do you mean that for us to achieve urban development, we need to focus on some specific themes?
Okay, thank you, Manuel. I think integration. One thing is that we, in terms of urban development, there are the basic principles for sure. That we must analyze the basic principles, like what is the problem in terms of what are the data available, and then you decide what you can call the proposed options for different perspectives. So it doesn't mean that there's a general, the basic framework is there, but every problem in terms of the answer of the development must be specific then in terms of what you prescribe for every problem. So that's why, and different experts that will be there. So I might not be able to provide that, say, for example, the problem I prescribed, the problem of Nairobi flooding, is the same that will deal with the same problem of flooding, maybe for Zanzibar or Dar es Salaam. So I must look at the specific parameters, but the design and the basis of collection of the data would be the same. So in terms of the development in general, there would be that element of the general understanding, but now you specifically provide the answers to this development, but it must be integrated. And the central part of that is the people, because at the end of it, in terms of sustainability of whatever you produce or whatever you do, is people to do it and for the people to do it. So these are the elements that I will bring across on that. I don't know whether we are opening also the charts, or we are reading from the charts, because I can see there are also questions on the chat.
Yes.
And maybe
Yes.
I could respond to few, because I've already seen some few of them directed to UN Habitat. And one of it, I think I think somebody from, I can see Jere is asking, how can UN Habitat help in terms of ensuring the plan are practically implemented? I think these are one of the things I highlighted very strongly, that sometimes the technical planning is well done, but in terms of the implementation, these are the where we need to check what is the problem. One of it is mineral governance issues. So these are the areas that we start building in terms of the capacity of those who we can call duty bearers. How do we capacitate them? How do we put them in a position that they are able to deliver the plans that are being proposed for implementation locally? I think planning in terms of the technical perspective, very good. When it comes to implementation, and also from my personal experience, planning also has a lot of element of resource allocation and resource allocation issues, and the interests in these land use spaces is also very high. So in terms of practical implementation, one is the governance issue, and how do we support capacity for implementation and monitoring, so that these plans are implemented for the good of all, and not just for probably the few, because sometimes plans are not implemented because of probably partisan, what I call partisan interests. So I think this is an area that we as the African actors in the urban space must be deliberate to deal with, both from trading and in terms of the tweak. Then I can see a colleague from Gambia is asking, how can we help on the city resilience action plan? This is good. It's there. We can maybe we'll leave our contact, and then we interact more in terms of even connecting with our urban lab, especially to support on this if it is on capacity and training, which would be very, very good in terms of doing the planning going forward. And then I think also there was, I think I had seen also the question, especially on what is happening in Ethiopia or Addis. I think it's to confirm that in Addis we are having the first Africa Urban Forum, which will be held in Addis Ababa. Thank you. These are the few I have been able to pick, and maybe probably from Q&A we can the others. Thank you, and over, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Charles. I think you covered most of the questions directed to you. Maybe one question that was pending, and then we'll have Heba coming in to give us a brief overview of the scholarship and all other information about the African Urban Lab, mostly how the scholarship runs. Will maybe Professor Leonard, you can elaborate on some of the strategies, because the question was all about a lot of development are concentrated in the primary cities, while the secondary cities are more or less abandoned. So what are some of the strategies that you can come up with to foster development for the secondary cities? Foster, Curtis, Charles, any of you can come in. Thank you.
I think maybe I can first of all come in terms of the secondary cities issues and further the main cities. I think maybe giving a very good example of what we can call those cities are more or less the primate cities, further the secondary cities which are coming up. And I think it's the whole thing is to use them in an advantageous way. We start equipping the secondary cities early enough, not to be the mess of the already mega cities, so that they become the attraction for life and the investment, so that you diffuse. I think maybe for the interest of the panel, the delegates or participants. For example, the Kenya situation now, we have the devolved systems where the devolution has gone and urbanization is also happening rapidly within those small centers of governance. So we need to equip them early so that these problems of probably lack of infrastructure, congestion, we deal with them, and smart city issues, we bring them on board as quickly as possible, so that these secondary cities, they become organically able to attract the people to be in them and the investments to go there, rather than looking at a way of discouraging or still trying to improve more on the already congested mega cities. So the secondary cities stands in as a way of us to look at how advantageous can we make them, so that they become more central and more attracting for the urbanization, and also helping us as an area that when you remember when a problem is already there, the interventions are more expensive than when you do the planning and the improvements in terms of infrastructure and all other services. So I think I would look at them in terms of instead of the secondary cities looking like they would end up being the crying babies, they should realize the muscle they contain or they hold, so that we build on it, so that they also start now attracting investments more and building in a more sustainable way. Thank you. I hope, maybe I don't know, but that's the perspective I would look at them. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have to add much more to what Charles said, but I would just say, any list of the top, 25, 50 fastest growing cities on the planet, about 70, 80% of that list is secondary cities in Africa. They're the fastest growing cities and towns on Earth for the next several decades. And so we neglect them and we avoid them at our peril. And I think the thing that drives this home is just looking at the history of urbanization as it unfolded in other regions of the world throughout history. You look at a picture of Los Angeles or Vancouver, where I'm from, 100 years ago or 120 years ago. These places were secondary cities at the time, and you look at them today, and they're Los Angeles is the second biggest city in the United States. Vancouver is the third biggest city in Canada, and so current demographic trends in secondary cities in Africa means some of these now small cities today will be metropolises 50, 75, 100 years hence, and we need to start making investments to make that urbanization happen smoothly. We need to start making investments in those places today. I know, Emmanuel, you put in the chat also to put in some final words. So I'll just say,
let me say a few words on this, because I think it's important.
Okay.
I think I will push back a little bit against like this secondary city being something less than, because there is nothing to be second. There is nothing, wrong with be built to be in one dimension, like basically second to the largest city. The big question is, how do we turn this place into, how do we promote economic prosperity and opportunities in those places? So, and I think one big factor in Africa is road network, like for instance, if you take places like the US and places like Germany, for instance, there is no dominant city because the road network is basically not heavily centralized. If you take Paris, for instance, everything runs through Paris. If you take Benin, Cotonou, everything runs through Cotonou. Like you leave northeast, you want to go 100 kilometers outside this, you have to come back to the city and move up. So, and I think infrastructure development to deconcentrate like the top cities and promote investment opportunities in the so-called secondary city is very, very important. But also, I think the last point is that if you give enough autonomy, enough resources, you build the institution properly, those cities will close the gap. So what I think that autonomy, agency in those cities to sort of promote their own development, prosperity along the line that we've been discussing will be the main solution to the problem. You see what I mean? Like, for instance, I take the mayor of a secondary city that set as a goal to turn this place into a tech hub, to turn this place into whatever. You see what I mean? And then they get the support and from national government, from international investors. And then all of a sudden, that place is a place where everyone wants to live. You see what I mean? So decentralization, autonomy of cities, infrastructure, and also along the line what I've been talking about, like universities, research centers, museums, all these things is something that will help to close the gap between the cities that are all way at the top and the city that's right behind. Anyway, so those are points that I thought I need to stress. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Heba, you have a word for the African Urban Lab.
Yes, so just to address a lot of the questions, so I answered most of the questions in the chat that had like specific Africa Urban Lab relevance, but just to answer all the questions, yes, the Africa Urban Lab has an East African focus, but it also accepts students and is looking for students from all over the continent. So please, if you're anywhere based on the continent or working on the continent, please do apply. There are scholarships and you can find them on asezanzibar.com/Africa Urban Lab, which I shared in the chat. And I'm sure there are array of scholarships and you will find the scholarships that will fit your needs. As Curtis has mentioned, the scholarships are based on two things, are based on merit and also based on need. There is no separate application for the scholarship. So once you apply, you are eligible for a scholarship, and again, based on merit and need. The last thing, this is recorded and we will share it once it's online. Gemma will put it for us all on YouTube, and we'll also share the PowerPoint for the Africa Urban Lab with the participants once everything is set. So just wanted to make sure, because those questions were asked a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Kata's final word, and then we close. 1 minute.
Yeah, I'll just say another heartfelt thank you to everyone for joining the webinar today. As I said multiple times, we're really excited that the Africa Urban Lab is the first research center, first of many, at the new university, the new African School of Economics, Zanzibar. You should, I know Heb has posted links to the ASC Zanzibar newsletter. everyone interested should sign up for that newsletter, and we'll update you over the course of the next months and the next year on programming as we expand from just one program at the Africa Urban Lab to more programs at the lab, and then expand to open the School of Arts and Sciences. We'll have a master's in economics, we'll have master's in finance and some other programs under some other schools as well, and you'll be kept up to date on that. So we look forward. Heba's also put her email in the chat. If you have any further questions or you're interested in partnerships, please do reach out and we'd be eager to chat with you. So without further ado, thanks so much, and I'll pass it over to Professor Wanchikon for a last word.
Oh, just to thank everyone again. I think it was really, really exciting to have so many people involved in this event. And, you know, it was super informative, and it was also, we provide a lot of ideas, not only for African urban development, but African development in general. So, and I hope you all see the potential and also the promise of African Council of Economics and African Urban Lab. And I really, really will invite each one of you to be involved in a variety of ways, not only being part of our training program, but also develop partnerships, I mean, and so on. And also don't forget that ASC is not just East Africa, it's Africa-wide. And regardless where you are, please get involved, and we really appreciate your support everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles, 1 minute, final word.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Curtis and Professor, and also participants. I think it was nice. I think this is an area that we need, all of us as actors be in it. And I think we are likely there, leaving no one behind. And as we combine in delivery of the SDG, and that is an area where we as the UN, we champion a lot, and also looking at making sure that no one is left behind. So the African Urban Lab is coming into this space to support and to deliver on these critical areas, because the future is urban. Thank you.
Thank you, my panelists, Charles, Curtis, and Professor Leonard. Thank you for accepting this invitation to really present on the need for capacitating the African urban management and the city practitioners. It's been insightful. We've gained a lot from your knowledge. Thank you. For the participants, thank you for attending. And we hope to see you in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. We have a side event on the same, but we will try to have more concrete discussion, and it will be nice to have you. Thank you.